I've received quite a few requests to update both my armor and weapon tier list for Grounded. I plan on doing that after the 1.0 update, but in the meantime I want to quickly run through the current armor and weapons that I recommend focusing on right now to complete all the current content in Grounded. Before we begin, I want to thank Handsome Ivan, Lyndon Dade, Matthew Campbell, Stephen Van, the Overseer 91, and all my other channel members for helping make videos like this possible. I also want to thank Mama Gamer for her tremendous support during my live streams. If you want to support the channel by becoming a member today, click the join button below or the link in the description. Thanks again to all my channel members. Let's get started. So I want to start off the video by saying that there's no right or wrong way. There's no right or wrong weapons or armors to use in Grounded. You can pretty much use whatever you want if you want to. You can make builds around specific weapons that might work for you. But what I want to do in this video is just tell you what I recommend using and what I would personally use if I started a new fresh playthrough to get through all the current content. Of course, this is subject to change depending on the 1.0 update. They might completely rework how the game progresses. We're not sure about that yet. So as of right now, when I'm recording this a couple months before 1.0, this is what I would recommend using to get through all the current content, which is currently through the upper yard, which would be the Termite Hill, and that basically that far. So what I want to do is just go through really quickly, and we're going to take a look at the armor and weapons I recommend upgrading. Now, of course, if you scroll through here, you're going to notice there are tons of weapons and armors that you can craft, but in my opinion, most of them you can just skip over them. You honestly don't need them. So what I want to do is go through basically from the start of the game through the current end of the game and let you know what I would recommend using. And we're going to start off by looking at the weapons and tools. So what I would recommend doing first is as fast as possible getting the Red Ant Club. Now, of course, you're going to have to make some stuff before that. So you're probably going to want to make yourself a Pebblet Axe. Obviously, you need this to repair the mysterious machine. You might want to get a Pebblet Hammer as well, just so you can break acorns as well as breaking sap and rocks and stuff like that. And then you're also going to want to make sure you make yourself an Acorn Shovel after you get some acorns. And then you're probably going to want to make yourself a Sprig Bow. You can, as of right now, the Sprig Bow is going to make your life is pretty easy, especially early on, because you can cheese a lot of the enemies, especially like the tougher enemies, like the stink bugs, the bombardier beetles, even ladybugs and spiders. You can kill them with a bow if you're careful enough and know how to basically keep them aggroed without them running away and healing. But as soon as you possibly can, I would recommend getting yourself the Red Ant Club. The Red Ant Club, honestly, is going to carry you through most of the game. I would personally recommend upgrading the Red Ant Club to level 5, and that should be able to get you all the way through the Hedge, Pond, Haze, and Black Ant Labs. It does do decent damage, it does have a decent stun, and if you upgrade it to level 5, it's going to pretty much get you through most stuff. Using it in combination with the Sprig Bow early on is just going to make your life super easy. Now, aside from that, which armors would I recommend using early on? I'm going to say that I would honestly, right now, if I was starting over, I would probably skip most of the tier 1 armors, if not all of them. If you're absolutely like hellbent on getting a tier 1 armor, I would say the grub armor is probably going to be your best bet because it's going to give you some stamina, plus it's also going to give you, it's a medium armor, so it's going to give you decent defense. I don't like the acorn armor because it has plus threat generation, which means it aggroes more enemies towards you. So I would recommend using the grub armor. Of course, you're going to want to make yourself the red ant armor as well, or the red ant armor. I wouldn't recommend leveling that up, honestly, because you're not really going to get any bonus for it. I would only use this for going through the red ant hill and the old ant hill to get yourself quartzite for leveling stuff up, and of course if you're building. But if you're going to use a tier 1 armor, I would recommend using the grub armor. Now, aside from that, what I would say, I would recommend, like I said, skipping everything and trying to get straight to Ladybug armor. If you're capable enough of perfect blocking, ladybugs are pretty easy to kill, but you can also, instead of doing that, if it's too hard for you, you can either use the bow, which you can kind of stand up on stuff and cheese them. It's just going to take a long time. Or you can make yourself a set of Aphid Slippers, which are going to let you, and you don't even have to really level those up because they just make you run faster. You can basically circle the ladybugs, and as long as you stay behind them, they're not going to hit you. And if you get yourself ladybug armor pretty quickly, that's going to make your life a lot easier, because the ladybug armor right now is probably the best between the tier 1 and tier 2 armors, in my opinion, and I would recommend leveling it up to level 5 or level 7, honestly. Like, level 5 will probably be okay to get you through most of the early game. If you want to level it up to level 7 to get that sleek bonus of the healing, extra healing from stuff, that's going to make your life a little bit easier. But the Ladybug armor, in my opinion, is the best early game armor. Now, aside from that, there's a couple things you're going to obviously need. You're going to need to make the Gill Tubes to just do the Pond Lab. Like, I don't believe maybe it's possible, but I don't believe it's not really feasible to try to get down to the Pond Lab without Gill Tubes. Even with like perfect swimming, I would recommend making the Gill Tubes as well as the fin flops as soon as you're able to, or when you need to do the Pond Lab. And then, of course, once you get beyond that, you're going to want to make yourself the bubble helmet, which is just going to make staying underwater a lot easier. Do you need to level these up? Probably not. I mean, the only stuff down there that you're going to have to fight is really diving bell spiders, and honestly, they're not really that difficult to take care of. And then, of course, you're also going to need a gas mask because you're going to need that for the Haze. I would not recommend leveling this up. I would only use it to get into the Haze lab, and then once you're in the Haze lab, switch back to your Ladybug armor or whatever armor you're using. And then aside from that, you might want to make yourself an eye patch. I mean, the eye patch you could use later on if you don't have the marksman's cap to help you do a little bit of extra damage for scares, but it's not like super important. But you're definitely going to need to make a couple of other tools early on because there's some certain things you're going to need just to progress. One's going to be the insect hammer. You're going to need the insect hammer to break the milk molars so you can upgrade your character stats. You're going to need the insect axe to chop down like tier 2 things, and this is just going to make your life a lot easier. And then you're also going to need probably the crow crossbow. I would recommend, honestly, I used to like the insect bow. If you can fight spiders, okay, but I would recommend, honestly, just going straight to the crow crossbow, because if you get the acorn axe, the insect axe, you're going to be able to just get the feather pieces pretty easily, and you can get silk rope, honestly, without really fighting spiders. You just go around and get webs. I would recommend going straight to the crow crossbow just because it does more damage. And then down here, you're obviously going to have to make at least brat burst to blow up some rocks. Torches, obviously. For shields, you don't really need the Weevil shield, especially if you're using the Red Ant Club early. Later on, you're going to want to make the Black Ant shield, but we'll talk about that in a second. And then you're going to need a dagger. So you can use the Pebblet dagger early on, especially if you're not able to get the eelgrass. But if you know where, there's a couple spots in the pond where you can actually cut down eelgrass above water, so you don't have to do this. I'd recommend either making the bone dagger or the spider fang dagger, whichever one you prefer, because you're going to need that to chop down to get to some of the milk molars later on, because there's underwater areas where you're going to have to chop some of the, I think they're called, like, I can't remember, soggy vines or something like that. So either using the the bone dagger or the spider fang dagger. And I think that's basically all the early game stuff. If you get those things, especially the Ladybug armor and the Ant Club, the Red Ant Club, those are the two main things. You can use those to get through the Hedge lab, the Pond lab, the Haze lab, and the Black Ant lab. I mean, they should be pretty simple. And if you get the Crow Crossbow, that's going to make your life a lot easier, especially in the Haze lab, where you can kind of cheese most of the enemies at the end. It's also useful for using them against the infected weevils, which we're going to explode when they get close to you. So if you just shoot those with the crow crossbow, you should be able to wipe them out before they even get to you. And also that the infected ladybug that's in there, you can kind of just stand in the hallway and just shoot her with the crow crossbow. Or if you want to get there, you can go with the Red Ant Club. Now, of all these things that I've mentioned so far, the only ones I would recommend upgrading would be, I would recommend upgrading the Red Ant Club to level 5 and then stopping there. For the Crow Crossbow, early on, obviously, you can only get it to level 5. I would recommend leveling up to level 5 as soon as possible, because all you need is quartzite for that. And then for the Ladybug armor, like I said, I would go level 5. If you want to go to level 7, that's okay. Even if you want to go to level 9, I know some people use Ladybug armor all the way through the entire game. That's going to get you all the way up to the Sandbox. Now, once you go to the Sandbox, you could still, if you're very good at perfect blocking, get away with using the same armor and the Red Ant Club. You're just going to have to go in there probably when the sun goes down because of the sizzle effect. Otherwise, it's going to make your life a lot harder. If you want to go in there during the daytime, or if you just want to make it as safe as possible, I'd recommend after going through the Black Anthill to make yourself, obviously you're going to want to make yourself a Black Ant Shovel because you're going to need that for gum later on. You're going to want to make yourself the Black Ant Sword. That would be the second weapon I'd recommend leveling up. I'd level this up to level 5 because I would personally use this. This is what I use when I fight against Antlions for the first time, along with the Black Ant Shield, which I believe is down here somewhere. Yeah, Black Ant Shield. So for the Sandbox, Black Ant Sword, Black Ant Shield. And then, of course, once you've killed enough Antlions, you can make yourself the Antlion armor. Currently, the Antlion armor is the armor I use pretty much all the time. The only time I swap out of it is if I am doing something like out of the ordinary, like building something and I want to use Red Ant armor. If I want to go into the Red Ant Hill to get quartzite, I'll swap to the Red Ant armor. Or if I'm obviously underwater, I'm going to swap to the underwater gear. But 95% of the time, I've been using Antlion armor lately, and I go the sleek path on that. So for the upper yard, that's basically through the Sandbox. I didn't mention the picnic table. The picnic table is pretty simple. The only thing that's up there are black ants, which aren't going to bother you unless you fight them. And then the bees, which if you're fighting bees, you can just use the crow crossbow. If you shoot them in the eye, it should either one-shot them, depending on the level of your crow crossbow, or it will severely damage them. One thing I did skip over was arrows. Obviously, at the beginning, you're only going to be able to make the regular arrows. After that, I mostly use feather arrows just because I've gotten a decent amount of feathers. They're also pretty cheap to craft. The specialized arrows here, you don't really need those. The only one I would actually currently recommend using would be the mint arrow, and that would be if you plug the weed killer and you're gonna have to fight the infected wolf spider, and you actually want to fight it. The mint arrow is gonna do a ton of damage to that. The salt arrow and the spicy arrow, I don't currently use those, and I basically just use the feather arrows. I don't like the splinter arrows currently because they have a massive drop off, and the super gas arrows, they're pretty useful, but they're also, you can only make so many of these at a time because you have to get them from the green shield bug. But that's going to, everything that right there, it's going to get you to the sandbox, and it's also going to include the picnic table. Now for the upper yard, which is currently only the top left corner of the map, so when I say upper yard, as I'm recording this, it's only this upper area here. Basically, the only thing up here that you're going to have to do is the termite hill. Everything else up here is kind of like optional currently. But what I would recommend is when you're able to, obviously when you're in the sandbox, you're going to be able to make the salt Morningstar. You also have gotten the recipe. You should have the recipe for the mint mace at this time. And then you can get the spicy Coaltana pretty quickly when you get up there, so which is inside the charcoal bag. Once you're able to make those will be the weapons I would recommend using for specific things. The Salt Morningstar is going to be super useful, and we'll just show that. The Salt Morningstar is up here. Salt Morningstar has a really high stun capability. I personally like using it early on when I'm like first time through the termite hill, using this with the black ant shield, and that's just going to pretty much carry through there because most of the termites are pretty simple. They just kind of do their AoE attacks, and that they're really easy to deal with, especially with the Salt Morningstar, which is going to stun them. The great thing about the Salt Morningstar and also the Red Ant Club is that they're clubs, so that means they're generic. That means none of the enemies have resistances to them. Now the downside is none of them have weaknesses to them, but it means you can pretty much level those up and not have to worry about having any type of negative modifiers where you'd be doing less damage versus what it's showing on the screen. So the Salt Morningstar plus the Black Ant Shield should get you through the Termite Hill. Of course, you're going to also need to, you can also use it against the Black Ox Beetles if you don't have a better salty weapon. Salty is good to use against the Black Ox Beetles. It'll stun them. You can kind of run circles around them. I've been using a Salty Club of the Mother Demon, but we haven't got to that yet. But the Salty Morningstar will stun them you can stun them, and also it attacks much faster, so you can burn through the Black Ox Beetles with that. The Mint Mace I would recommend. The Mint Mace, of course, is also a club, so it's generic, but it's also going to have, since it's the Mint Mace, it's going to have the fresh. That's going to be super useful against Ladybirds and Ladybird Larva, as they're both weak to it. Particularly Ladybird Larva, you can usually two-shot them if you level them up. And then the Spicy Coaltana is a sword, and it's got spicy built into it. This is going to be useful for roly-polies, also the sickly roly-polies if you go back to fight them, and this is going to be the weapon I would recommend using for the Broodmother, because she is weak to I believe she's weak to both spicy as well as slashing, so it's the best weapon to use against her. And so basically it's honestly like using the tier 3 weapons. If you want to use, I would recommend honestly at this point skipping over the Antlion Greatsword. I don't see a point in making it. It's also kind of expensive to make with the Antlion pincers because they don't have a high drop rate. The Club of the Mother Demon you'll get after you beat the Broodmother. If you want to level this up, honestly right now I'm recommending leveling this up the Mighty Path, just because that'll just be like a straight generic upgrade. It'll be generic weapon with Mighty, which nothing is strong or weak against. It's going to do a ton of damage. If you want to get, if you want to be super sweaty, you could just use this and make it in all 3 different of the fresh, the spicy, and the salty, and it will probably be your best bet overall just because it has the most raw damage. But honestly right now you don't really even need to make this weapon, but I would recommend if you want to have a general overall use weapon, going the Mighty Path of the Club of the Mother Demon. And then you're also obviously going to, at some point, you're going to need to make the Termite Axe currently. You need the Termite Axe to get to the Termite King. You're also going to need that to get the splinters for splinter arrows if you want to go down that path. The Black Ox Hammer, which is right here. Currently, as I'm recording this, the Black Ox Hammer has it's not necessary. I'm sure it's going to be necessary at some point in the future for breaking something. There's going to be some busting. At one point, you did have to use this to get to the Spicy Coaltana recipe, but they've changed that. But right now, you don't have to make this. It's kind of up to you. I'm still using the Insect Hammer, but honestly, the Black Ox Horns, the Black Ox Beetles become pretty trivial to fight once you know how to fight them. And you can use basically either one of these, so that's kind of up to you. And then finally for armor, basically what I'm currently using is I use the Antlion armor, like I said, 95% of the time. You could get away with using, I know people that use Ladybug armor to do everything right now, and then obviously some people like to use the Roly-Poly armor. It's kind of up to you. For these, I use level 9 Sleek on the Antlion. I have not used Roly-Poly armor. I don't know which people that have used it have recommended going the bulky path just for the extra damage, the extra protection it's going to give you. I go Sleek on the Ladybug because it gives you a little bit extra healing. And then aside from that, really most of this other stuff's going to be kind of optional. Some of the stuff that, like the Firefly headlamp, can be useful if you're mining quartzite in the dark. The eye patch can be useful if you don't have the marksman's cap, because they did kind of make it harder to kill scarabs, which you're going to need to upgrade your weapons to levels 8 and 9. So if you don't have a marksman's cap, which you have to get to level 6, the eye patch at level 0 will give you the extra damage that you need with the crossbow if you level that up, I think, to level 7. I did a video on that, which you can go watch. That tells you that how to make that useful. The rest of this stuff, like I said, is kind of optional. I've tried out most of these armors, especially after the updates, and to be completely honest, I find most of them to be underwhelming and their bonuses not to be that great. I used to love the spider armor, but now that they made it where it just does extra poison damage, if you want to go a poison build, go ahead. I mean, the poison does do some damage. It's kind of useful, but I don't currently use it. Most of these weapons I don't like. I don't like the spears. I don't really use the daggers other than for being underwater and chopping stuff. The mosquito needle to me is underwhelming. And then I don't use most of the arrows, like I said. And then the two other things that have been added, I still use the torch plus. I mean, the Everchar torch is that's okay. And then obviously you're going to want to make yourself the canteen. I still use a canteen plus. I don't use the charcoal canteen because this takes durability damage I believe when you scoop stuff with it or drink, I can't remember. I just don't use it. I just use the canteen plus. So those are basically all the things that I recommend. Now for the tier 3 weapons, obviously if you want to get them to level 9, that would be recommended. That's the current highest level. So the Mint Mace, the Salt Morningstar, the Spicy Coaltana, you can get those to level 9 if you would like. The Club of the Mother Demon as well, you can get to level 9. I would skip the Antlion Greatsword. For armors, whatever armor you're going to choose, whether it's the Antlion, the Roly Poly, the Ladybug, or whatever else, I would recommend eventually getting that to level 9. You don't currently need it to level 9 because, honestly, at this point, none of the enemies are going to, as long as you know how to deal with the enemies, they're not going to really provide... They're going to have to, not that much challenging. I mean, you can pretty much, like I said, if you know the game well enough, you can circle, like, the Black Ox Beetles, you can circle the Roly Polies, they won't, or you can just straight up just cheese them. So, anyway, that's the current progression that I recommend going through. I know this was a lot, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically just copy and paste all the armors and stuff and put those in the description down below if you want to reference them and see which ones I would recommend using. If you have a differing opinion, if there's something I skipped over you would recommend using in a different order, let me know in the comments down below. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the like button and consider subscribing for more videos just like this. If you want to support the channel even more, click the join card on the screen right now. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.